Okay, I think we'll get started. We'll let people come in as they join. Hello and welcome everyone to this week's Honest Conversations on the Discoverability Network. We're delighted to have you. We're going to be talking about advocating for yourself when you have a disability. And we have three excellent guest speakers who are going to share their perspectives and their comments and their experiences. So we'll get to that. For those of you that are not familiar with Discoverability, we're an initiative of the Ontario Chamber of Commerce. You'll see the logo in the bottom right-hand corner. Ontario Chamber of Commerce is a nonpartisan, nonprofit network of over 157 local chambers of commerce and boards of trade and over 60,000 businesses. Discoverability is a project that we've had for the last several years that connects inclusive employers. So employers who are intentionally wanting to hire people with disabilities to job seekers with disability. So you do that by signing up for free on our system. If you have any questions about how to sign up, we're going to put a name in the chat that you can reach out to directly, and she will be able to either direct you or set up a Zoom call so you can get one-on-one support. We do have a lot of employers currently hiring, so I hope to see all of you signing up on the system. We also offer these weekly events, Honest Conversations, as well as training that we deliver on an organization by organization basis on topics related to disability and employment and networking events. And I believe we have a Kingston networking event coming up. I don't know if you have that in front of you, Elizabeth, the date, but that's posted on our Eventbrite, and we hope you sign up to meet some employers and some service providers.
February 15th.
Thank you very much. Okay, so my name is Lisa Kelly. I'm a programs manager with the Ontario Chamber of Commerce. You can follow us on social media or tweet out about today using our hashtags @HireAbilityNow on Twitter and on Facebook. So before we start, I'd like to acknowledge that the work that the Ontario Chamber of Commerce does takes place on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, which is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. Our regional hubs and partners across Canada similarly gather on the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations who've cared for these lands since time immemorial. So welcome. With that said, I'm going to introduce our panelists. Now, for those of you who are wondering, as I said, Lisa Kelly, I'm your moderator today. I use the pronouns she and her. I'm an older gray-haired woman or white-haired woman, white woman, and just delighted to be here today. So I'm going to start by introducing our first panelist, Laura Barry. Laura is a partner and administrative assistant with the Department of Professional Practice at KPMG LLP. He has almost a decade of office experience, specializing in executive support within the finance industry. She is a proud person with a disability and an advocate for neurodiversity and mental health. She's actually been a guest on some of our other sessions, so we're delighted that she's able to join us today. She's an active member of the Disability Inclusion Network, a KPMG Canada people network focused on breaking down barriers and reducing stigma within the firm and externally wherever possible. Now, Laura, I'd like you to say hi, and maybe if you could just take a moment or two to also mention about your relationship or your thoughts or why you're interested in self-advocacy.
Thank you for having me. So I suppose I'll start by defining self-advocacy, which to me means knowing yourself, knowing what you need, and then knowing how to ask for it, which seems very basic, but for me, my visual descriptions are white, young female, round red hair with glasses. It's a little more difficult and challenging. but I really appreciate that we're able to do this. Thank you for having me.
Oh, no problem. Okay, we also have Aaron Inocencio, and Aaron has a detail-oriented mind and uses a systemic, organized approach to his design projects. While managing a disability, he's been involved in a lot of activities that evolve, promote, and stimulate leadership and soft skills such as networking and public speaking. In 2019, Aaron, who self-identifies as being neurodiverse, participated in a 6-week work integrated learning internship for students with disabilities, where he worked at a company called Level 5 Strategy. One of the things that immediately stood out was his conscientious focus on his tasks. In his own words, I like to talk my ideas through. Sometimes I even talk out loud at my desk while I figure things out. Aaron has worked out what accommodations he needs, and it's allowed him to thrive in that environment. I think you were Employee of the Year last year, in fact. He works a bit differently than his colleagues in his workstation setup, and his abilities, innovative thinking, combined with creativity and a unique way of viewing the world have resulted in a full-time position at Level 5. So welcome, Aaron. And again, if you can just mention, your relationship or definition of self-advocacy.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me very much. For me, my definition of self-advocacy is knowing that you want to make it more comfortable for others to get to know you first before coming and opening up to people, and to let people know what you are facing for such a long time, and then after this, everything will always fall into place. So I believe that self-advocacy is hugely important in this manner.
Oh, I really like that definition. Thank you for sharing that, Aaron. And finally, we're joined by Jocelyn Crosby. And Jocelyn, welcome. She's a coordinator of the Accessibility Initiative at the Ontario Council of Agencies Serving Immigrants, which is short form is OCASI, and that's what we'll be calling it moving forward. She brings a diverse perspective, having worked in the settlement sector for over 9 years in Windsor, Ontario, as well as having worked with OCASI on 2 of their initiatives throughout the years, the Accessibility Initiative and the Positive Spaces Initiative. She's an ever-evolving facilitator, as am I, so that's a great description, learning new techniques and ways of breaking down complex theories and thoughts for the consumption of participants with every training. She is completing her undergraduate in women's studies, social justice, and political science with an aim to pursue law afterwards. Welcome, Jocelyn. And same question to you, your comments on self-advocacy, and welcome.
For sure, thank you. I actually often love being the last person because then I can just say ditto to what everybody said in terms of the definition. They both summed it up very well, and I would definitely agree with all of them. In terms of my relationship with self-advocacy, I think that as well as someone who's neurodiverse, who's had to advocate for themselves in employment settings as well as in school settings, that it kind of near and dear to my heart. And a visual description, I am an Afro-Indigenous Irish woman, very light-skinned presenting. I'm wearing a white shirt and a very colorful scarf with a piano behind me.
That's great. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we're going to go right to asking questions and getting to know everybody well, and learning more about self-advocacy. So I'm going to start with Laura. Laura, how do you believe that the process of advocating for yourself changes or is impacted when you have a disability?
That's such an excellent question. As a person with an invisible disability or multiple invisible disabilities, I find that it's very easy for others to make assumptions about my abilities and needs. I have the privilege to be able to pass as neurotypical, which means I deal with a lot of gatekeeping when I'm asking for help. When I find a barrier that I need help or accommodation with, I find there's often this added step of needing to prove myself, often to someone who doesn't know much about the topic. Can be very frustrating at times to deal with this gatekeeping, but it's important to remain patient and Keep in mind that they are trying to understand, and everyone is on a journey of learning. And when it comes to this stuff, I try to explain to the best of my ability, and just take the time. My best tactic has been to share a personal story or use metaphors to explain my lived experience, because conceptualizing what neurodiversity is kind of very nebulous. So particularly when I'm trying to get people to understand my lived experience as someone with dyslexia, my favorite metaphor is everyone is playing connect the dots, only my copy doesn't have any numbers on it. So simpler shapes are easy, but more complex shapes, the more I end up with a different picture than others. Not wrong, just a different picture. So that really normally gets people to understand where I'm coming from and what my perspective might be.
That's really interesting. And I'm glad you explained, you commented on that. And again, for all of you, as we go through the panel, please feel free to share that out as well, because I think for everybody, it's learning. We all have different disabilities. And so it's always a learning process for everyone as we go on this journey. Erin, can you tell us from your personal experience as a person with a disability, how you came to better understand your abilities and maybe needs in the workplace?
Well, it's actually quite a bit of factors in here. Even before I worked at the current company, level 5 that I am right now, I've always had this trouble of relating socially, and at times I could not read the body language of people, but yet I am a very visual learner because I also deal with graphic design and art direction. And so over the years, I've realized that I wanted to build the self-advocacy piece of myself because I've seriously lacked that skills years ago. And I always needed to tell them I need to wear headphones because sometimes I can hear acutely even the pen drops and the pen writing. And then I can hear in my current situation, I can hear if I'm in the office, I can hear like 2 meters of someone open the door. So that's kind of like the distraction piece. And up until now, I'm still learning how to tell them that I am still learning how to become more social and to grow with everyone and take into the journey of adulthood. So yes, it has, in the last year or so, I found that I've become a bit more understanding of what I need to tell them, what I am dealing with, as well as the abilities that I can best explain to everyone.
I really, how have people engaged with that in the workforce, Erin? So have people been open to that at the organization?
They have become a bit more accepting and have become like akin to a family.
That is great to hear. And I'm going to toss that back, and Jocelyn, I'll have you answer this when we get to it. But also for you, Laura, like, how did you come to understand what you need? How do you figure that out?
Well, I always refer back to the triangle of awareness, I think is what it's called, where you have on the 3 sides emotions, thoughts, and bodily sensations. And so the idea is check in with all 3 sides of that triangle to help assess how you're doing, because you do have concurrent thoughts, emotions, and bodily sensations, and it helps you assess what your state is. And then once you're able to assess what your state is, you're able to assess your needs and then go from there.
Great. And Jocelyn, I'm going to let you tackle this before I ask you the next question. So, in your own personal experience, how was that? Was it a process of learning what you're really great at and where there were gaps, or have you always known that?
Trial and error. I think a lot more failure at first than being able to to succeed a lot in a lot of those areas, as much as succeeding would look like for someone like me. But it was a lot of, failing different attempts at different things, different task lists, different platforms to organize your thoughts, lots of trial and error.
And did you get feedback in the workplace that was helpful to you? You don't have to say yes, but I'm just wondering, were there supports in your organizations to help you with that process?
For me, there was. I'm fortunate to also work for an agency where we have a project specifically about accommodations and accessibility in workplaces, and we kind of train. So thankfully, it's something that's not just theory, but practice within the agency.
Well, that's amazing news. So I'm going to stay with you, Jocelyn. Can you talk to us about some of the benefits of self-advocating in the workplace?
For sure. So I could probably say a lot of things, but I'm going to kind of condense it a bit to just 2 or 3. So in terms of the first benefit that I can think of, it's just getting the accommodation that you require. So if you tell somebody that you need an accommodation, or if you're fortunate enough to have an employer that you're open enough with to be able to also disclose what your disability is, they might have a lot of assumptions on what you need, which, if you have ever tried to accommodate yourself in terms of the way that you process things, you'll learn, just like me, that there are trial and error situations. But if you're advocating for yourself, then you already are coming to them with a solution to how to go about work in a different way. The second point, I would say you're laying down the groundwork, not just kind of for yourself, but for other people as well, because the employer is going to learn sooner rather than later that there are different accommodations for different things. For example, one person might have ADHD, but the accommodation that they need is possibly going to be a lot different than what I need. So laying down that kind of groundwork for the employer is also going to benefit them as well, in terms of the next time somebody comes for that type of accommodation, and laying down the groundwork in general, just having started that conversation with your employer. And I think actually that one kind of leads into the notion of taking up space. There's a very real invisibility that exists with people with invisible disabilities that we constantly reinforce ourselves. So the more that we're taking up space and having those conversations with our employer and saying we need these accommodations, the more they're going to realize that these kinds of accommodations need to just be commonplace and no longer necessarily need to be accommodations. They're just things that they offer ahead of time when people are coming.
Oh, wow. I really like that idea. So Erin had shared earlier that the headset, and I had met Erin a few years ago, and I now use a headset because it helps me focus. I find I'm distracted, and I didn't know that. And by actually meeting Erin, hearing from him, it allowed me to learn something about myself that was helpful. And so that whole idea of then making the employer aware of that, as well as our peers, is so valuable. Thank you for sharing that, Jocelyn. Laura, do you want to add on to that? So again, I think this is a really important piece. So what are the benefits? Why do we do it?
I think the benefits is I am a big believer that you teach people how they treat you. So by advocating for yourself in the workplace, you boost your self-esteem and you improve your work relationships by showing that you have values and that you would like to be treated a certain way. Everyone can respect someone who wants to be respected, and it actually will go a long way towards gaining your goals. But to Jocelyn's example of sometimes people will assume accommodations, I have personally had corporations assume that I need, for example, dyslexia. They assume I need dictation software. I just need earphones. I just need earbuds to help me. There's no need to make a computer that's way too advanced for my own use. I just need to block out the sound and I'll be okay. So ask me what I need first.
I love that idea. So what do we do, Laura, if we don't know what we need? We're in the workplace. We see that we're experiencing difficulties, but we don't actually know what will help. Kind of like me with the earphones before I met Aaron.
It's okay to ask and to brainstorm with some people and to try different methods. So often we think that a workplace accommodation plan is this set in stone tablet because I signed a contract and so now we're going to do this. But it's a living document. Particularly at my work, we check in every 6 months to see how has this been going? Is this actually useful? Would you like micro breaks in your day? Would that help you manage your stress level? Or would we like to talk about reducing your workload? So it's an ongoing discussion.
That kind of leads into one of the things that I like self-advocating, which is to achieve a goal. You know, it's to help you get where you need to go. So if it's going to help you, it's valuable. Aaron, what about from your perspective? What do you think are the benefits of self-advocating for yourself in the workplace?
So I think you both got it correctly with how you can see the benefits. And I'd like to add on to something that a philosophy I have developed recently is the notion of social rapport, where people, if you get to know them first, you need to be more comfortable with them first, they are more likely to open up and to share you into their world of what it is that they are dealing with and what they are interested. So you're basically going to get them to open up their minds and going to let them know that, hey, I am dealing with something, and where in turn they will understand all of your circumstances. Oh, sorry.
No, I think that's so well put. So basically, if I can sum up, so we're doing it to educate others about ourselves, to build a better workplace culture. And those are both really great, reasons. So tons of reasons why we want to self-advocate. How do we do it? And this isn't my question, so I'm throwing this out to everyone. How do we do it in a positive way? Who would like to tackle that first? Laura.
With a smile, ideally. You're asking for something, so remember your manners. We're Canadians. But it genuinely, you open more doors with honey than with vinegar. And once you have had that successful accommodation interaction, you've now made this contact. So think of it as a resource that you can go back to and continue to reinvest in that contact, assuming that it is a resource that you can go back to. But I find thank you notes and just being appreciative from the get-go is very helpful.
And I'd add not feeling bad that you're asking for it. So we're not apologizing. And welcome, Sarah from Ireland. And I'm sure Irish people are just as lovely as Canadians. So everybody's asking nicely. But yeah, I think that that's a really good tip, the smile. Jocelyn, some ideas for, asking for accommodations in a positive way or to elicit a positive outcome.
It's a tough one. Other than like smiling and whatnot and thank yous afterwards, I find it really, really difficult. It really, I don't know, I guess it probably would depend on the agency that you're asking or the person that you're asking. Maybe start with someone within your agency that is more approachable, like if it's your manager or your HR is more approachable.
Yeah, so figuring out who's open to that and who to disclose to, I guess, is then part of that. What about research? Have any of you done research on what accommodations you've needed before you go? Jenny had put that into the chat. I think it's a really good suggestion. Aaron, how do you ask for, what you need in a positive way?
So in some cases, I will always explain to them in much detail because I like details, and tell them, hey, for example, if I'm asking to do the headphones, I need to ask them, hey, I'd like to get my headphones because I can hear everything amplified, and then I can hear even the smallest things. And then so sometimes I put in more detail, but the thing is that people will understand once you need to tell them what it is for what it is, and then they once you be concrete with them, they will truly understand.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Aaron, and thank you for sharing that. So it's like providing an explanation or educating why that need is there, which is, I think, a really, as somebody who works in this field, and when I talk to employers, I always suggest people have a rough idea of at least where the barrier is. So noise bothers me. That's a barrier. Leave it open for the solution, because I guess they could give you a private office or they give you the headset. There's a lot of, or they let you work from home. So there's a lot of, leeway in there. So, for me, that's why the value of knowing your strengths and weaknesses is so important. And when we say strengths, it's really focusing that you can do it. And it's not really a weakness. It's just sharing that you do things in a different way. Would you agree, Laura?
Absolutely. And I think that it's important that when we're self-advocating, try to be mindful of the situation that you're in and the timing, and consider who you're talking to, and will they actually be able to assist you, or is this not going to be a productive conversation? I think that's something that a lot of people need to keep in mind when advocating as well.
Yeah, and Jay's popped this in. I was going to bring this in too. So accommodations aren't a favor. They are your legal right. But what that accommodation is and how the employer who gets to decide what that is, it is better positioned. And I think this is where you're going, Laura.
Yeah,
It's better positioned as a conversation than a demand.
So
yeah,
I agree completely. It is a human right that we all have, and that goes right down to the social disability model. But when asking for something, it always comes off as some sort of a request. And so knowing that we're asking, we have to be mindful of that whole dynamic, which is always very frustrating because there's this need and I need this thing and I want it now. But we have to be patient and be mindful of the fact that this is not an everyday occurrence for other people.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, I can think of an instance in mind where I asked for a quieter part of the office, and it just turned out that the offices that are quiet have windows. And then everybody else in the office thought I was getting a favor. They thought it was because I wanted a window, and it really wasn't. And then, but because I hadn't disclosed to everybody, that's really complicated for the employer to handle. So I think just understanding it is a discussion. It's kind of fraught with a lot of ups and downs, and who you choose to share with, whether it's everyone or just your manager, can be challenging. Laura, can you name a strategy for how a person can ask for accommodations for their disability? So we've got the smile.
Mhm.
Yeah. We've got have it be a discussion. Any others?
I have so many, but I've actually kind of found the 5 steps to self-advocacy and realized that all of them are kind of present within. So I'm just going to go over the 5 steps of advocacy and kind of explain how all of that would work, if that's okay. Hopefully this will take 3 minutes. So the first step is identify and clarify. So what is the issue and what is the solution? So with this, we really want to encourage self-awareness. You should always be checking in with yourself, the triangle of awareness I mentioned, seeing how you're doing, and looking for ways to improve. Once a barrier is encountered, once it's been identified, think where you want to go. What is your ideal solution? If you can, this is a possible. The next one is reach out to a trusted ally, reach out to a friend, a coworker, a family member, someone that will help you create an action plan, engage in the problem solving, really think about what you want to happen. The third one is have courage. So one step at a time, remember that you are worth it, and practice what you're going to say. Be prepared that you may not get what you want, but practice anyways.
Laura, do you mind at some point of sharing these steps, by the way? We're getting lots of comments. Okay, sorry
Yeah.
for interrupting you. Okay.
The fourth is speak up. So speak to someone who can solve the issue. Choose the right time and the right place, and be clear and kind in your request. So this is where we want to support the critical thinking, because it is going to be a negotiation process. There is going to be a dialogue. And we also want to build buy-in. We want to actively create allies in this exchange by encouraging people with their acceptance and support. Maybe go a little over the top in that, because making sure that you are getting them on your side is really important. You don't want to create another obstacle in your life.
That's very true. Yeah.
And stay positive while you do it. So I mentioned do it with a smile. Bonus points if you leave a thank you card, or if you mail a thank you card. That gets people's attention, and it actually gives you really important networking opportunities for future employment or for future awards and other life opportunities. So keep those in mind. Be very thankful when someone has put that connection through. And then the last step is reflect. Do a self-check. So going right back to the first step, seeing how you're doing, how are you feeling, what are your emotions, thoughts, and bodily sensations, and what did you learn? Any follow-up steps that you could take, and what could you do next time this situation occurs, thinking ahead. So those are the 5 steps.
Excellent. Excellent. That's really valuable. Jocelyn, how about you? What strategies do you have for when you're asking for an accommodation?
Other than what Laura has said, she's pretty well summed it up. I think that the only, how's the best way to put this? You have to hope for the best, but you have to plan for the worst. You do have to, you have to look up legislations that are going to support your request. You're going to need to, and this is something that I had to do at another employer before, that you need to know what rights you actually have based on legislations within your area. So Ontario, for example, would be AODA and the Employment Standards Act, and you would just make sure that you're focused and aware of those legislative requirements that employers have to follow in the event that your kindness and your smile and your thank yous go absolutely nowhere. In which case you'll have to make sure that you've done enough work ahead of time to know exactly how to ask for it if it gets denied.
That's actually a really good point about understanding the legislation. So for those of you on the call, you're protected under Ontario Human Rights Code against discrimination on the basis of disability. The Canadian Human Rights Code, you have AODA. We've got the Employment Standards Act. We've also got health and safety that disability is also covered under. So there's a lot of moving pieces, and actually the building code as well for physical and built environment. So you need an understanding of that, but also remember that the employer is struggling with balancing all of these as well, and there can be completing claims, which is why I do like Laura's suggestion that this is a discussion. Sorry, Jocelyn, you wanted to add?
Yes, I forgot to mention one really, really important thing that actually helped me a lot in the last agency: your internal policies. All of these agencies have to, because they're governed by those legislations, have to have accommodation policies. If you start from the ground with just their own internal policies, it also makes it a little, it facilitates the conversation a bit easier. It gets a bit more easy to receive, because then they're trying to adhere to their own vision, mission, and values within their agencies. So it was just a point that I forgot to mention. Thank you.
No, that's really good. And the other thing, and I'm going to turn this over to Aaron in a minute and get his feedback on it. But one of the things that I've found very helpful when I disclose or ask for an accommodation is the whole explanation piece. Aaron, you kind of mentioned that earlier, but it's like, I can do my job better. I can make you more money if you give me the tools to allow me to do that. And this is what I need because I'm facing this barrier. And that's part of the discussion too. So yeah, guys, be aware, but again, it's a discussion. The employer is going to choose the accommodations. So it's best to go into it as a productive discussion where you both want you to be the best in the job. Aaron, do you have some suggestions for, strategies for asking for accommodations?
That is a really good question, because I've always had this natural, like some of it did happen quite natural in my situation because some people may have already seen what I was doing, and then others I need to explain them a bit. But if I were to name a strategy, is to sum it up what the great points before have said, is to just know a bit of yourself before starting to tell them what you are facing, because the more that you understand about yourself and the more that what your needs are, the weakness and the strengths, the more likely that the people will understand and just to put a smile, as Laura has said.
Got a lot of people with the smiles there. Yeah, so some questions came up just as in the chat as we're going. They're asking for additional time in training or different training options is an accommodation strategy, and you can definitely ask for that. If any of you work with employers that are not aware of these, the Discoverability Network offers free training directly to the employers, or we can do one that's open to any employers on these kinds of topics. We really want our businesses to be inclusive of people with disability. We want them to understand their obligations. So part of our job and part of this program is to talk about these things and offer free training. There's also some great tools for those of you that are, don't want to work with us or want to go directly to the employer. And I'll get Elizabeth Novak to pop this in the chat. But there's a training called Able to CA Learn. And there's free training on that, on accommodations and disclosure for employers in little microbursts of 15 minutes at a time. So that's a tool I really like. So there's just one you can look up. Okay, we'll start with Aaron this time. In your opinion, Aaron, how much of a role does self-advocacy play in bolstering your sense of self-esteem and self-confidence?
This has played a huge role for me because I've always liked to improve myself socially, and I have explained before about the social rapport piece before, and adding to that, it creates this sense of comfort with people, your coworkers, and if you open up I quite open up a bit more than I did before, because people are understanding. They were able to start opening their world to what the description looks like, and it really started to realize that I'm becoming a bit more empowered to continue to become the best version of myself, despite the fact that I'm still having a bit of problems with social skills.
So you're being accepted for you versus you having to do all the changing. I kind of I kind of like that idea that you're helping other people grow to see the whole you instead of you having to make all the changes. Jocelyn, sorry, Aaron?
There were some things in my experiences where I had to try everything, but there are some determinations in me that I know that people understand. I know that people need to take time, and I know that people need to see the true potential of the person.
And where did you learn that about yourself? Like, where did you develop that determination?
So I think this was back a few years ago. This was even before I went to Humber College back in 2017. I had another place before this, and the one thing I kept noticing, reminiscing that time, was that I did not have a confidence because there were the culture at that time was not built to understand the disabilities, and I had to do everything that I can and to the best of my abilities to tell them to develop the self-advocacy skills needed to even speak about my accommodations. But despite all of that, I'm looking to today, and I have seen so much improvement of myself for how long, like the quantum leap of things.
Yeah, Aaron, with your permission afterwards, we can talk about this. I don't need you to promise, but I'd love some of you to see Aaron's work. He's a brilliant designer, really amazing. So thank you for sharing that. Jocelyn, what about, same question. How much of a role did self-advocacy play in your self-esteem, your confidence?
Everything. Like if it wasn't for self-advocacy for so many aspects of my identity, not even just the neurodivergence, but also the ethnicity, the sexuality, the queerness, the everything, self-advocacy was important in terms, it played a very crucial role in terms of building up my self-confidence to the point where I feel a lot more confident now asking for exactly what I need.
Does it become a self-fulfilling prophecy? So the more you self-advocate, the better your self-esteem, the more you self-advocate, and so on. Or is it a one and done?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Or is it a one and done?
I was going to say yes, and also the less you have to do it. The more you self-advocate, the less you have to do it. Because people around you will just, confidence exudes almost from your skin as soon as you walk into a room, and people are a lot less like it's infectious, right? So it's a very important thing to have in terms of it, and it'll absolutely help you moving forward, doing that really more crucial, more difficult self-advocacy later in the event that you have to.
And Laura, what about for you? Same question.
Self-confidence and self-advocacy go hand in hand. I'm realizing now why I was sent to a self-confidence camp and when all of the other kids went to camp because my parents looked at all of the resources and they realized that she's going to need to have quite the stubborn streak and the will to get what she needs. And luckily I naturally have the stubborn streak, but it's all about learning how to ask for what you need and check in with yourself. So if it weren't for the confidence camps and the Girl Guides and being paraded out, I don't know that I would have the ability to interact with crowds. I am a very shy person, but when people see me in a crowd and I'm surrounded by people, you can't tell because I have been taught how to manage those situations. And it all comes back down to very early on, my parents figured out that confidence would be key and self-confidence would be key to self-advocacy.
Would you, again, putting you on the spot here for all three of you, But let's say we haven't had parents who sent us to a camp, or we haven't had the same opportunities. Where do we develop that? How do we find that within ourselves? Where can we look?
That's a wonderful question. I guess I'll jump in. There are a bunch of resources online. I am a huge advocate for making sure that everyone has a counselor, because just like we all have a dentist, we should all have a counselor to help us manage our mental health. We all have physical health, we all have mental health, and counselors are normally very good at helping you develop those steps. But without that paid service, there are also many platforms and guides that can direct you. But that's normally my 2 cents is your counselor.
Jocelyn, over to you.
For sure. So I didn't grow up. I was rather underprivileged in terms of money and lots of other things. One of the things that helped me a lot in starting to build that self-confidence and that self-awareness was having a really good role model. And this person didn't fall within my family per se, my biological family, but it was my chosen family. So it was within your friend or your colleague group or something. There was just a person that you were able to kind of look to and then try to find a way to emulate, right? Because as you're growing up, you're learning from everyone around you. And eventually you're going to have some kind of role models that you're trying to emulate anyway. So if perhaps it's not within your own family, like with mine situation, I think that it was a major important aspect of my development into being able to be a self-advocate, because I was able to kind of have that role model to look up to and to try to be like.
That's great. And Aaron, what about you?
Well, I can echo the same sentiment for the two of you, and that the one way that I've always gone through everything was, and when I was back in college, I've always had someone to speak to and listen to, be it was my professor at the time, or it was the counselors and the people and some trusted friends, because you can never have too much people around, and then when you get, as you wait, let's see, sorry, let me just so yes, I had the same kind of similar experience, and that I had role models, I had people to look up to, I had my own set of aspirations, even to see that I can become the best version of myself and become successful.
Perfect. It's so amazing. So Laura says she's an introvert, and I've seen her speak in front of, you and I spoke in front of 2,500 people. So,
Yeah.
And Aaron's designing everywhere, and Jocelyn, you're now like working with OCASI in a senior role. So it's like, it just shows us how the value of our chosen friends and family, not just who we have and where we were born into. Jocelyn, so we've talked about the resources. So we've said mentors, friends, family. Any others that you can think of that you would, I mean, personally, I like I think Elizabeth's put this in, the Job Accommodation Network in the States. I know it's an American, but the Searchable Online Accommodation Resource is a really great tool that can help you figure out what accommodations you need and give you language around that. Employment counselors or organizations like OCASI. Do you have any other suggestions that you'd like to add on to that?
I think it would take a long time.
Okay.
Probably send out a list.
Yeah, let's do that. We'll send out a list. if all of you can share yours, I'll share mine, and we'll put out a list and send it to everybody with this deck so that they have the tools as well. I'm going to end and then open it up for questions. But what does the term disability confidence mean to each of you? And how important a role does it play in advocating for yourself? All right, so start with Laura.
Disability confidence rephrased is essentially disability positivity, and it means embracing all that we have to offer as individuals, as a community. It is indicative of a supportive culture and inclusive culture, and based off of the social model of disability, which focuses on social oppression and environmental barriers. This runs counter to the old traditional model of medical disability, where which focuses on the individual's defects. But the social model says that I'm fine the way that I am, but there's a barrier preventing me from fully engaging in the environment and society. And disability confidence means that I understand myself to be a natural being deserving of the same rights and experiences as other people. And it plays a huge role in how I advocate for myself, because without it, I wouldn't be so open. I would be a much more private and insecure person. I would not disclose my diagnosis with people because we would be in the medical model, and that would not be something I would feel comfortable disclosing. And I certainly wouldn't be working towards change.
Okay, great. Jocelyn?
Disability confidence. I think everything that Laura said, obviously, I'm just going to keep saying, oh my goodness,
Yes.
ditto, Laura, ditto, Erin. But it's like a level of confidence about an aspect of your identity. Oftentimes, a lot of parts of our identity, especially things like that are more invisible, we can kind of carry a little bit of shame for a little while. Oh, what happened? What could I have done differently? What could have my mother done differently, perhaps, while I was like in her womb? Like there's so many things that we carry with us with regards to that. I think disability confidence is kind of overcoming a lot of those that perhaps we were learned or we were taught when we were younger, or we hid for such a long time, especially when it's an invisible disability and you can invisibilize, it's probably not a word, but let's just say that it is, yourself. So disability confidence for me would be the opposite of that. Actually just living your true self, not being afraid of your abilities, and and obviously the importance of advocating for yourself is I don't know, obvious with regards to that. Like,
Yeah, I think when you said earlier that it's everything. So yeah, they're linked. Erin, what is disability confidence to you?
To echo some of the sayings, disability confidence to me means that as you started to accept who you are as a person, and as the essence of you is becoming confident that you yourself can make a difference and thriving to wherever you go, and make sure of it that you have the same dreams as everyone. Everyone wants to be great. Everyone wants to live great lives, and for that to tie into the self-advocacy, it also means that you now know the foundation to start helping yourself. Wait, sorry. That you have to start realizing more things about yourself, whether it be hidden talents or hidden potential in yourself. And it's more of a self-discovery for me, as well. But the definition of the the definitions that have been said before, they are the same principles.
I totally agree, Aaron. You should be facilitating because you're wrapping all our comments up into a nice bow tie. Now we're going to open it up to questions. There is a question that I see right in front of me here. Somebody's typed in, does anyone have any advice when your disability is episodic?
Erin, do you want to get this one? I noticed you just muted.
Can you repeat that, please?
So does anyone have any advice when you have an episodic disability? So sometimes you're completely fine, and then maybe you experience a difference in scale. So it becomes moderate or severe. And, people don't understand that because looking at you, they're going, why the change? So, how can we self-advocate when we have an episodic disability?
I'd be happy to jump in.
Sure, Laura.
I have generalized anxiety disorder. So one of the episodes I experience involves panic attacks. So knowing that, I have to accept that that is a fact of life sometimes and not fight that, but also plan ahead in the way that I advocate. So am I sensing something coming on? Is there something that I can do to clear my schedule? Is there something that I can do to get personal care time away from work? And particularly when it comes to the firm that I work with, KPMG, we have flex hours, which allow me to step away from the computer. As long as I get my work done, it's fine. But we also have workplace accommodations and then short-term disability, which it only takes 6 days in order to start that. But I know other firms is like 30 days. So it's very fast acting because we want to make sure that the finances are not interrupted for you, because that's also very stressful if you have to deal with that on top of having other things. So
yeah, especially if you're in a small business, that can be more challenging as well. So yeah, that's a really good question. I agree. Jocelyn, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Nothing that hasn't already been said.
Okay, so my disability is also episodic. And, I guess the one thing I could say is knowing the frequency and tracking that over a longer period of time. So when I start with a job, I usually tell them on average, I will have to take more time off. It'll usually be in chunks of 1 to 2 weeks. I might be able to work offline, but I won't be able to come in person. And then maybe once a year, it's a month. I have a pretty good idea when my episodes, the frequency by tracking them. So again, it's telling the employer what you need to know. And then usually I share, but every job I've ever had, I excel by a factor of 2.0. I've, met every target. So again, focusing on that you're able to do the job. And I also have backups. So Elizabeth Novak on the call today is my backup for everything. I'm her backup for things, but if I can't train, Elizabeth's there, or I have somebody else arranged. So again, anticipating what you might need and then planning forward so that when those episodes do happen, it's minimal disruption for the employer and for yourself. With that said, we are out of time. We can get these people back because Laura, Jocelyn, Aaron, you guys were amazing. Thank you so much. We'll follow up with all the tools that we promised you with some of the links, but I can't thank you enough. I can't thank Rogue and Jillian, our ASL interpreters from Toronto Sign Language Interpretive Service, enough. And Elizabeth, is there anything else we should know before we end today?
Yes. Next week's Honest Conversations webinar, Thursday, February 10th. We will be talking about strategies to help you survive your job search, because it can be a stressful time. So we hope you'll join us at 1 p.m. for that, and you can register on Eventbrite for that. Just type in Honest Conversations in there, and the posting will pop up.
Great. So everybody have a great day. Thank you. I'm going to get you all back. I'm going to be doing a TV show in March, and maybe I can extend the invitation to this panel because you guys were phenomenal today. So thank you very much. And
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
having me.
take care, and we'll see you all next week. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.